see so many friends and people that I have enormous respect for in the audience, and I think this is just such a highly educated, on-point audience that I wanted to bring you something that was useful. And I happen to work for a giant software company called Autodesk, and for those of you that don't know me, I lead our company's efforts in sustainable product design and manufacturing. So I have a team. We think about ways that we can infuse our technology with modules that help a designer assess eco-impact downstream. But I do a lot of work in the ecosystem here in New York City because I live and work in Brooklyn. So the title of my presentation is The Way a Software Company Sees the Future of Making Products. And a lot of this is going to be things that are familiar to you, but I wanted you to see how myself and my colleagues are viewing all of these trends that are going on in the industry and technologically, and how we're synthesizing that, and how it's influencing our tool set. So does that sound like a good use of 30 minutes or so?
Yeah.
Okay, we can talk tech later if you want. I live here, so anytime. So I've been with the company for about 6 years, and when I came to Autodesk initially, I was hanging out with a lot of people who were around my parents' age in enterprise companies, gigantic industrial machinery, automotive companies, and I'm still hanging out with them. But the group of people that I'm also hanging out with right now are folks like these guys. So that's Adam and Daniel, and they have a company called ModBot. And they met about a year ago for dinner, and they said to themselves, we don't really like the way things are going in the market. And you can't see this video because of the lighting, or maybe you can, which is a pity, but the point of this is that they got together and they were able to start a company and get investment in about 9 months. They were on stage at CES, they were pitching this, and we're hanging out with them because we really feel that companies like these are going to disrupt the market in a pretty substantial way. And because, yes, we're a software company, but we're a tool maker, we want to be around to help them. Oh, it's still playing. Well, you saw in the background there's a little sign that said Highway 1, and that's an incubator. They were an Australian company, and they moved to be part of the Highway 1 incubator. And we're spending a lot of time in incubators around the US. So we're involved with New Lab and a lot of incubators that are on the West Coast. So this is what their stuff looks like. They're focused on robotics. The pieces you see here were generated in a software we have called Fusion 360. And you can see that they're somewhat whimsical and lightweight, and they really came to us because they wanted to accelerate this process. And we really value working with them because they give us a unique perspective on what folks in a position like theirs are doing and what they need. So these are the 3 areas that we're focusing on a lot in the conversations inside Autodesk. So we see trends happening. You could group these in a lot of different ways, and I think a lot of this is not going to be news to the folks in the room. The one area is in production. The next is in the things that are happening in terms of buying behaviors and consumption. And then lastly, what's going on in the product itself. And I think we're designers and engineers, so I'll maybe talk about these in terms of axes. And there's change happening on all 3 of these axes, which makes it a very, very interesting time to be lucky enough to work in the field that we do. So I'm going to start with production. And yes, this is about the machines and the means of production, but there's actually very interesting things happening in terms of intellectual production as well. So what do I mean by that? Well, the folks that you see up in the upper left-hand corner are working with colleagues. They may never meet. So the Prime Minister of India was here a few weeks ago advocating with the US government to have better trade between folks who are skilled in India in engineering and product design, because their hourly rate is much lower than folks who live in the US. So I think there's going to be more and more interchange between engineers and specialists of all different kinds across the world. The change is also happening in terms of folks working in co-working spaces. So you may be, embedded as somebody in a large company in a co-working space or alongside other startups, and that sort of fragmentation and decentralization is happening as well. I mean, could I see a show of hands of how many of you work in co-working spaces or incubators or design hubs? Yeah, a lot of you. So this is a big shift. The next is just this idea of open IP. So I never expected that GE would have patents out or things that I could take and design on top of. This is a huge shift. And then we have folks like Quirky who are saying, okay, let's crowdsource this and figure out how that comes to market that way. So that's another huge shift, as well as what we've seen from Arduino for quite a long time. And then here's the pristine shot of the data center. I love this. They always look so contained, but I think about all of the things that these data centers are holding, like all the text messages and the chats, and there are always these very, very quiet spaces, but there's a lot percolating underneath. But the point of showing you this data center is that now that so many applications are hosted in the cloud, you have enormous computing potential that you just wouldn't have been able to have on a desktop, or it would have been really annoying or tying up your desktop computer for a long time. So this is a substantial shift. There's the 3D printer. Were you waiting for the 3D printer? There it is. There's also a shift, as many of you know, where the cycles between getting customer input and funding are happening more in the beginning than they have been traditionally. And you also have folks like the amazing folks working in network manufacturing. And can I just say that these folks are like the horse whisperers of what we do. They are incredibly important. I'm thrilled that a lot of them are here, and I think you should spend time talking to them if you haven't already, because they know what's happening well beyond what most do, because they're working with companies who are trying to get things produced. So they're a tremendous resource for all of you. But the point of showing you this is just that there is this fragmentation. There's no longer, having your own vertically integrated manufacturing company. You have opportunities to utilize underutilized capacity from other partners. So there's really interesting things going on there. Were any of you at IMTS? No, so interesting. That's the big manufacturing conference where a lot of, oh, you were, I'm sorry.
It's because I'm gray.
No,
yeah.
I'm gray too, but you know what, I took care of it. So this is a 3D printed car. Both the chassis and parts of the body were 3D printed in a span of 6 days. And we partnered with Local Motors. Did you guys?
The car was in Maker Faire as well.
Yeah,
But you
yeah.
actually watch it get built at IMTS.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Maker Faire, they had it built already. When you were at IMTS, you watched it.
Yeah, what this gentleman said, if we didn't hear him, is that it was at Maker Faire, but it was being printed over the 6 days at IMTS. And we partnered with Local Motors to do this because if you can, as you can imagine, printing something as large as a car is really, really challenging. So you might have heard of an announcement we've made over the past few months about the Spark platform. Do any of you know about this? Okay, well we're launching, thank you, you saw that. We're launching an open platform called Spark. And one of the main components of Spark is a print utility. And what we're trying to do is get rid of some of the pain of the process involved in modeling something and taking it to a 3D printer. So you can imagine with something as large as a car, oops, sorry, you're just gonna have a lot of issues. So while this is sort of an outlier case of what we're trying to solve through the Spark platform, it's still an early success story that we're really excited about. So next we'll get into consumption. This is a big factor in the work that I do with sustainable product design. And what we're finding is that there are different interests with folks who are buying things. So I do some work with NYU ITP, and I did some mentoring with some of the students there who are starting businesses. And while that example that I mentioned before about working with the enterprise enterprise companies and trying to influence them into more sustainable product design, that was happening much later in the process. But now I see the startups coming online thinking about sustainability right off the bat. So Rana Plaza collapsed 2 years ago, and I think it changed a lot of perceptions on wanting to know who's making my product, where is it coming from, what are the materials implicit in this particular product. So these are things that we're actively working on in our portfolio. And then I guess this is a gray hair, dark blonde hair slide, but I want to point out, how important this group of Gen Y millennials is. So even if we think about it in the political sphere, things like same-sex marriage, legalizing marijuana, I highly doubt those would have been at the elevated level of public discourse that they were, had so many millennials not been participating in that and advocating or not advocating for those things. So this is a group that's becoming more and more active and more vocal, and they're a group that we're watching quite closely. And then on the other side, you have the baby boomers. And I think this is an interesting group too, because for a long time, there wasn't mass customization, there wasn't bespoke things, there wasn't personalization of objects. So this group has been slow to realize that they can demand different things, whereas the Gen Y millennial group has just been doing that all along. I wanted to show an example of a company based in Oakland. This is a company called Honeypoint. They're using Fusion 360, and their whole business model is that you can go in with an idea and you can leave with a printed product. So they're taking folks from the prototyping, the reality capture, and the material sourcing and production phases, and helping folks realize these ideas that they might have. And they're staying engaged with the folks who are coming into the shopping center. Through Fusion 360, they'll leave with a model, but then there are collaboration tools similar to Facebook that they can use to iterate on that design and either scale manufacturing or get input from others to make the design better in a future run. And then lastly, the product itself. So before I showed you that 3D printer, and now I'm showing you the Internet of Things. So I think I don't need to say much here given the group that I'm talking to, but I think there's an expectation that things are connected. I think that's just, people are surprised when they purchase a product now and there isn't a service or an app or some kind of internet-enabled technology attached to it. And because I'm a sustainability practitioner, I brought you an example of the Tesla. So this is such an interesting thing because what Tesla has done is said, we don't want you to buy a new car. We want to make this car better over the lifespan that you own it. So that's making things refurbishable and modular. That's improving software components on the platform that you see there. And I think they're a major disruptor in the space, but I think we're going to see a lot more disruption like this in the future. This is Pinocchio. They're a really interesting company because folks who don't know how to code can use this to make connected devices. And I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I suffered through a Ruby on Rails class and it was very challenging. So I hope that more come out like this that make coding accessible to folks who may struggle with programming languages. So these are the three trends. Are these a surprise to you? I doubt it, that these are the things that we're looking at. It's just an interesting time because you're seeing change on three axes instead of just one or a cluster of things happening in one particular area. And I think it's important to share these with you through the lens of a software company because this is us. Which one of these do you think is us? Anybody? You're not going to hurt my feelings.
The one on the left.
I think we're the one on the left, but I We know that things are changing at such a rapid pace that we're really, in a way, trying to disrupt ourselves. And I think we've spent a lot of time talking about manufacturing, but the thing that I'm most excited about at working at Autodesk is that we don't just work in manufacturing, we work across all of these industries. So we have tools for infrastructure and for building. Architects and construction professionals are now learning from manufacturing. They're applying lean manufacturing technologies to making buildings. Do you know that buildings, the way they're built, hasn't changed very much from the Empire State Building to now? Only recently have they learned how to do modular design and apply ways to make the process leaner and so that there's a lot less waste. And these are things that we're learning from each other across industries. So yeah, if we look back, we were the little whippersnapper when we launched AutoCAD in the documentation era. And then we got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then came the optimization era. And I think it's important to be honest with you. I don't think Autodesk was first to market in optimization. I think we played a game of catch-up there. And we've done a lot of work to change that, but it took a long time, and that is a really uncomfortable place to be. So while it was a hard time for our company, I think we learned a lot from it, and for that, it's valuable, and now we have a really excellent portfolio in that regard. And this is what we're thinking is the next era. So there was that documentation era, the optimization era, and now we think that it's an era of connection. So just like I was talking before, the lessons that can be shared between industries, obviously the connections that happen through disparate groups, either groups that are not geolocated together or groups that might have different expertise. I think I'm excited to hear about the cross-industry collaboration that we'll hear in a panel later, because even in my work in sustainable design, it's pretty wonderful to collaborate with a biologist on solving an industrial design problem, because there are huge things you can learn from the 3.8 billion years that nature has been doing in R&D for a long time. So I think that connection between different skill sets, between folks from different backgrounds, is incredibly important, and this is what we're seeing as the next era. And it's because of folks like this that we're thinking this is the next era. They're connected all the time, and they're using our software in really interesting ways. In fact, a few days ago, we made a big announcement that we're now offering our software. We've been offering software to students free for a long time, but now students, educators, and schools everywhere in the world can get whatever Autodesk software they want for free, which makes me really proud to work for a company who will do something like that and will invest in the future. Beyond that, there are students who are climbing the learning curve towards product design and manufacturing, but there are also folks that may just have an idea and not know how to realize it, or might really want to do reality capture of their dad's head and put it on top of a pest dispenser. Feel free. So that's the work we're doing in that era. We also acquired Tinkercad a while ago, and I remember the last time I was at this conference, that had just happened, and there was a lot of talk about that. And because folks love that software so much, we try not to do very much to it. And if we've failed or succeeded at that, let's talk back there, because I'm really interested. I know that there's a pretty devout Tinkercad user base in the group that we have here. And then lastly, there's this aspect of prototyping and fabrication. So Fusion 360 is a cloud-based platform. We betaed it at Autodesk University about 2 years ago. So we've had 2 years, or actually more than 2 years, of learning about what a platform looks like in the cloud and what is most useful about it. We also, this is a recent announcement we did at Maker Faire. A common complaint is that a lot of these CAD softwares were only available on PC, or you had to run parallels. Well, not only is this a software product that runs in the cloud, it's something that has direct tie-ins to Mac, and it's a really nice experience. I use it myself on this very machine, and I think it's we've done a really nice job with it. So the thing I like about it the most, and what we learned from listening to folks like Adam and Daniel, is that they don't just need something to do the conceptual modeling, they need something to take them all the way through to, not the end of the process, but to the fabrication stage. So they needed something where they could do the creative modeling, and the conceptual design, the detailed engineering, and then we allow them through CAM 360 to not only fabricate, but also to have that align and go straight through into a 3D printing application. And I'm sure it goes without saying that the Spark platform I mentioned before is going to be closely tied to the way you can fabricate something from Fusion 360. And then there's something called A360 that allows for a light incidental collaboration between the designer and folks in their team. So yes, there's PLM, and that allows for a collaboration between different parties as well, but it's a different nature of conversation. Sometimes you just want to run something by somebody really quickly. You want it to happen in the design environment. Maybe it's somebody that doesn't use a modeling software, but it would be important for them to see the different items in the assembly, and A360, I think, does a nice job of facilitating that conversation. And this is just what that looks like. Whoever did this slide had a good sense of humor because it's a microphone and the person's name is Mike. Hey Mike, let me know what you think. Next version will have a mic on a stand. Looks great. So this is what that looks like. And you can see that it's very visual. You don't have to leave. You don't have to send an email. You don't have to fire up PLM. It's all happening in the space where someone is modeling. And then I just wanted to bring this to show you too that simulation tools are really important. I value them a lot in my work in sustainability because if you're doing a lot of iterating and experimentation on something, you need to be able to see how it's going to fare in the real world. So a lot of people, conceptual designers, are a little bit afraid of finite element analysis and other simulation platforms like computational fluid dynamics, and this just makes it really simple. So you can plug in some constraints and you can say, here are the forces that are going to be exerted on this particular thing. Check it out. You've got infinite computing. You've got that pristine, quiet data center that will do the crunching for you and not tie up your computing power. And this is an area that I'm also really, really excited about in the Fusion 360 platform. So I'm going to give you another picture of a 3D printer. And it's a 3D printer that really stole the show. We talked about the 3D printer that we're developing at the same time that we announced the Spark printing platform. And that's the exciting part of the announcement. We developed this so that we had something to play with and test that utility against. And it really ended up stealing this show. So it might steal the show again because it's pretty beautiful. But this is something you'll hear about more in the coming months. And while I mentioned that I live and work in New York City, our mothership is in San Francisco. This is a facility we have called Pier 9. Have any of you been here? Great, some of you have. Well, I invite the rest of you to come and visit whenever you're in San Francisco. You can take my card and I'll make sure you're well taken care of. This is a space. We have a state-of-the-art kitchen. We have amazing 5-axis milling machines, an army of 3D printers that not only printed one material, but several. It's an extraordinary place. We host artists in residence there so that they can test our software, they can work with our technical teams, and really realize these amazing ideas that we have. So I just wanted you to know about this, even though it's across the country. Please use this as your invitation to visit us there. So this is the ecosystem. I've talked about Fusion 360, I've talked about the work that we're doing with consumers and the next generation, the work that we're doing with education, with 123D Make and Creature. You know, I had breakfast with a friend of a friend this morning, and she said, I don't know exactly what to talk to you about first. I want to talk to you about synthetic biology and material science, but then also green stormwater, and then, you know, computational fluid dynamics, and I get that a lot. People say, you're everywhere. Autodesk is everywhere. And I'm really happy that they don't say, you're all over the place. They're just saying we're everywhere, because we realize that we think we're placing a big bet on the fact that this is the future. So we've made strategic investments in this place so that we can have a really, really nice ecosystem for the folks who have ideas to realize those ideas and make amazing products. So what does that mean for our core business? You know, what's next for this giant sumo wrestler that's been in the market for 30 years? Maybe this. But we're hoping that the things that we're learning will help us disrupt ourselves, and just like we learned from other lessons in the past 30 years we've been in the market, we're just so excited about all the things that we're learning now. So we're challenging ourselves to bring you the best solutions possible so that you can very, very quickly get to a place where you're just experiencing that joy that so many of you experience in having an idea and getting that to materialize into not only a product, but into a business. So that's what I brought for you today. I'm thinking maybe we can continue the conversation in the back over beers and wine and snacks. Does that sound good? Thank you for your time.